Money Podcast. This podcast is a weekly exploration into a new philosophy of money through psychology, philosophy, and practical wisdom. In this episode of the Mindful Money Podcast.
So if you think of the relationship you have with money similar to the relationship you have with a person, you develop a healthy relationship and you discover what that means. I think it's critical and not done enough.
Hey, welcome back, guys, to this week's episode of the Mindful Money Podcast. I'm super excited to share our guest with you today, Adam Lippen. I've known Adam for almost a year, and this guy is a real inspiration. It's interesting to find out that one of his businesses was right around the corner from where I grew up. And he's got this awesome platform called Cuddlist, which is just blowing up all over social media, all over the news. He called me the other day. He was on the floor of Wall Street. So welcome, Adam, and thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you here. So we'll just get started with a question that I ask everybody at the beginning of every podcast. What is your belief around what money represents, and how has that changed as you've evolved?
I love this question. I love everything about what you're doing because we talk so much about everything, and we in this culture, but what we don't talk enough about is money and what it means, and finance, and taking care of yourself and owning it. And there's so much, weird energy around money, and so this is a brilliant concept you have. So the relation to money. So I think money is necessary to function because if you don't have enough money, you spend all your time thinking about, how do I get more money and pay your bills, and it's very stressful. So I think it's really important, and if I had my life to live over, I would have done it differently, that the younger you are, the more you can get tight with your money and have a real understanding of how to save it and what it means and what it can do for you and can't do for you. You should get that information and learn that as soon as you can.
Awesome. Excuse me. Let me grab some water. Hang on. Awesome. So has that changed at all? Has that been your belief the whole time, or how did you grow up? What's your story?
So I grew up, I'd call it lower middle class. We had a Chevy Chevette that was bought, a demo model at the end of the season. And when I was a kid, the gas would get turned off, and my parents were always fighting about money because they didn't have enough. And so I grew up in that kind of environment, and it motivated me in a sense to make money because I started making money really early. I had my first job at 13 or 12 even, and I worked through college to put myself through college. And so money was something that I needed to have, and I know what it was like not to have a lot of it.
Yeah. So where are you at now? I mean, some people may not have even heard of Cuddlist. And I know that you had another business before this. How did you get there?
Yeah. So, out of college, I started a company called Atomic Wings, and it's a wing chain. We have about 30-something locations, and it has been my vocation for 25 years, and it has supported me for a long time, sometimes incredibly well, sometimes not as well. But it is a lot. So in terms of the value of money, so I guess this is a great way to sort of frame it. So for a while, I loved what I did, and I was really motivated and passionate about, making sure the world had the best chicken wings they can have. Yeah. And I was really motivated about employing people and giving people an opportunity to work. Those two second motivations stayed with me forever. The sort of making sure the world had good chicken wings. I mean, that sort of died for me fairly soon because my life path was a little bit different in terms of yoga and meditation and veganism. And so I lived a very split life. But the concept of money for me during a good chunk of my adulthood was that it allowed me to do things that I liked. So it allowed me to go to India. It allowed me to take a bunch of different certification programs in meditation and yoga and attend workshops and as I had a child, support my child. So it was a means to do something. The value of money was only in terms of what it could do, as opposed to a means to an end, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think as I get older, the more I understand that if you can make money and you can have a healthy relationship with money, you're going to be a lot happier. And it's not necessarily the amount that you have, but it's the relationship that you have with it. So if you think of the relationship you have with money similar to the relationship you have with, a person, and you actually put into that kind of content, so you develop a healthy relationship and you discover what that means for you and what steps you need to take to get there. I think it's critical and not done enough. So that's why, again, I think this podcast is brilliant.
Yeah, and that's if I were to take exactly what you just said and apply it to a slightly different context, that's what you've done in a way, is you've created a company that nourishes people and nourishes each other, right?
Yeah, so briefly, Cuddlist is a platform where we train and certify people to be professional cuddlers. And then we have a website, Cuddlist, CUDDLIST.com, where people can go to it and find a certified cuddlist in their area, request a session, get more information. So the concept is that, touch is something just like money. It's out there, but no one really talks about touch, not in the context of a sexual relationship. And the concept of touch, just like the concept of money, has all of this sort of like weight around it. And people are afraid to talk about it. They don't know how to use it, et cetera, et cetera. So the concept is to make safe, healthy, healing touch available to as many people as possible. In order to do that, we need to come up with a training program and train the right people to be able to offer that service. And my ultimate goal is to sort of really help change the definition around touch in our society. And just like people should, like you're trying to do, have them really talk about money and understand its value, I want to do the same thing with touch. What is touch, and really what is the value of it, and what's the purpose of it, and how it can be used as a healing modality. Just like I think you're really getting people to try to understand that money is a tool that you can use to make life better if you hold it in a way that's healthy.
Exactly. That's exactly the message. And more importantly, I do dig into the relationship that people have with money. And what I find is it's less about money and more about themselves. It's more about listening to that inner dialogue, knowing what you need, just like you mentioned, if you treat money as a person, right? But you can have that same dialogue with yourself. And most often the things that come into that play with money, I find, are very much tied to people's inner messaging. So how do you think that, like, the shift that you've made has your messaging changed, or has it? And say a little bit about that. I feel like there's a lot there for you.
In terms of money or in terms of Cuddlist?
Either one. But I was referring to Cuddlist and specifically your transformation that I know I've heard about, kind of offset, so to speak.
Okay, so my transformation has been, for many years, even if I was making money, and I was making money, it wasn't making me happy. So with that money, I would do things like, it did serve a purpose, and it's a valuable purpose, but I also wasted a lot of money because I needed to get out of myself. So I would like buy some stuff I didn't need, or I would act out in ways that I didn't need to act out because I was able to do that. And money for me at that point was sort of like a way to get out of myself, and almost like a drug, right? And so therefore I wasted a lot of money. And nothing, that you do, like you can get, 8 massages a day, your body maybe feel better, but if you're not in the right headspace, it's almost going to make you feel worse, because you realize that that's not going to save you. Money's not going to save you. And what it'll do if you're not careful is put you into spaces that it actually, your relationship with money and the behavior around it will harm you and harm those around you. So my relationship to money now is, so I'm making less money now than I've ever made, since I was 22 when I started in real estate. And the reason for that is, I sold a good chunk of my company, about 50% of it, this past August. And so I don't have the income that I have. I got a nice chunk of change, which I put in the bank. And then I have a couple of years of, taking paper. So that's the amount of money that I live on. And I try, my business right now, Catalyst, is starting to make some money, but, I put a lot of money into it over the first year. And so it's been very interesting how I relate to money right now. So I had never thought about, I'd spend $20 on lunch without really thinking about it. I'd just go to some restaurant and I'd get, my lunch and an appetizer, and it didn't even dawn on me. And now, I don't, well, I do it sometimes. I mean, I don't want to say I don't ever do it, but like I'll go to, this falafel place and get hummus and an Israeli salad and tahini and a hot sauce. And, it's $6. And I find when I'm conscious about the way that I spend money and I think about money, I'm a lot happier because it helps make you a more contented human being. So, for example, consciously spending $6 on hummus and Israeli salad versus unconsciously or sort of in an acting out way, like I need to treat myself and to go to a restaurant and have spend more money than that. I find myself feeling better. It's almost like a spiritual act because the awareness is there as opposed to when you're just doing something mindless. Yeah. So I find now my relationship with money, well, for years, but it has a spiritual overtone because it has a purpose. And I don't know if I'm ever going to make the same money that I ever made again. And now my goal is to I want to make enough money to support myself and my family and not have to go into savings so I can have a decent retirement. Yeah. But my goal is shifted. I mean, if the opportunity came up to make a whole lot of money, but my business model right now is not going to lead to that. Maybe it'll shift. But that's where I'm at right now. And I'm happier now this past year than I've ever been.
Exactly. That's really motivational and powerful to hear because you said a whole lot of things in there that I just kind of captured. You're speaking from a story that I feel I come from, maybe not to the same degree with a huge franchise, but I definitely went from the office job to barely making anything. And it was a matter of spirit. It was a matter of purpose, right? So a couple things that we do with the people that we work with is give them principles or things to follow, little tips. And you mentioned that your goal has shifted and asking people why. And that reminds me of the fact that, we always say, hey, don't just spend your money, apply a couple principles, but purpose every dollar, and you've talked about this sometimes desire that you have to act out, right, and do something because you need to treat yourself, which is something that a lot of people aren't even willing to look at. And so all these little things are practices that we can put things in our way, right? We can have that conscious awareness of us when we spend, and it becomes a relationship that we have with ourselves. So one of the points that we're researching too is this idea of a comfort limit, right? So I could say that if I have $1,000 in my pocket, I'm willing to spend maybe 80, 90. But if I have $10 in my pocket, I'm only willing to spend not even $1. If I have 100, it might be $8. So it's just this kind of baseline comfortable place that we have with regard to our spending. And what I heard and what you said is you went from having a whole lot and to now having less, but having to think about it more. So how do you think just that has affected other areas of your life, that shift from having all of that to not so much? You mentioned that you feel better than you ever have. Did I get that right?
Yeah, well, let me try to answer it maybe a little convolutedly. So yesterday I had this amazing experience. I was asked to speak to this company called IDEO, which is they're cool, right? It's this worldwide company that they do design work, but more importantly, they capture the essence of experiences and how to create experiences for corporations, et cetera. And so they interviewed me because they wanted to talk about Catalyst, but because we're all about building connection, and therefore and so they wanted to hear about how we build connection, et cetera, et cetera. And we started talking about some really interesting things, and it was really wonderful. So they paid me, I told them my hourly rate was $375. So they paid me in cash, which is like so much fun because I haven't gotten paid in cash for a very long time. And
That's a nice
So
feeling.
yeah, so it was cool. So I was in the city. I was over like at 1:30. I live in Manhattan, and I had $375 in cash with me. And so I sort of practiced the principles that you're saying without really knowing that these are principles that you said. It's like, okay, I have this money.
Yeah.
And it's like I treated it very specially. So like I was down by Chinatown, and so I went for lunch in Chinatown, where I get lunch for like $6.90, including the tip. And so I was like, and I always pay everything with credit card. But I made sure I paid in cash because I wanted to feel it. And then it was like it was tactile. And then later on, it was my birthday a few weeks ago, so I was having dinner at my sister's apartment. They made an early dinner, and then I was meeting friends for a later dinner at 8:30 at night. And these are really old, close friends of mine, and they're both fairly wealthy. And so I got there a little bit late, and they had already ordered a bunch of appetizers and this and that. And so, and I was really enjoying myself. It was lovely to connect with them. When the bill came, my share was $70.
Okay.
And it was such a wonderful way to spend $70 because it was like I was sharing this experience, and I was happy that I had the $70. And it became an experience, and it was sort of a lovely thing. So I took out a $50 bill and a $20 bill, and it was really beautiful. So I don't know. I mean, I had a very conscious experience with money yesterday.
Good summary. That's really interesting, though. The fact that you were more aware than just, hey, here's my card. Let me go spend whatever. That's an awesome thing. So you mentioned that Cuddlist creates connection. Talk more about that. I mean, it's obvious with, if I'm cuddling somebody, yeah, there's a physical connection there, but you guys have been blowing up for a reason. I'm curious if you have any
so
insight.
the essential sort of thought process, and actually having the conversation with IDEO really helped me realize sort of how meaningful the work that we're doing is.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like the concept is that and I'm a big yogi and I'm a big meditator, and so I believe yoga and meditation is how do you discover who you truly are, right? And I think once we at least have a glimpse of who we are, which in my opinion is divine nature and total connection with every being and everything, then we're in a different level of consciousness. So we all know that famous Einstein quote, like you can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness that created it. So what I loved always about yoga meditation is that it creates a different level of consciousness, so you can respond and react and at least know that you have a different, even if you leave the yoga class and you're a lunatic again, you have that touch point that you're able to have a different level of consciousness, and so you have an awareness of it, and then the practice is to use it. So what I think Cuddlist is really doing, and I think the reason, like you said, we've touched a nerve here, is that we're through the actual cuddling experience. When one person is with another person and there's no expectation of any sexual activity happening, then it creates this condition where you're able to see another person as a human being, right? And then you're able to see them in the eye, and then you're able to have a moment of recognition of total humanistic, even larger connectivity. Right. So for someone, if you think about how most of us, like your business is trying to make people conscious about money so they make better choices and have that integrate and help their life, because they're adding consciousness to their life. Right. So if you're conscious about anything, money, that's going to help you be more conscious with all other aspects of your life. And so most of our healing modalities, if you go to therapy, you talk about all these, reasons why you're a certain way and regrets and what you wish, et cetera, et cetera. But if you see someone and you can connect with another human being on a really instant level where you realize that you have there's something that happens in meditation.
Yeah.
Right. Where there's just this instant connection and you have this recognition of a connection with another person. So you see them in the eye, you feel their breath, you're holding their hand, you feel unconditional sort of acceptance. And we teach, that what you're asking for and what you want is lovely and fine. And it's right. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to feel better.
And
And what we really do, I think, is we help people. I think the one of the most damaging things that sort of the whole self-help and community does is they tell people just do what you love, find out, do you live your passion. Well, for most of us, we don't know what our passion is.
That's true.
Because we're disconnected from who we are. So when someone would tell me when I wasn't sure what I wanted to, live your passion, it made me feel bad about myself, because if I know what my passion is, then I can live it.
It's like
right?
Instant shame. Yep.
Right.
I remember that.
So I think if we take some time to slow down, and so we do with touch. Well, what kind of touch do you like? Well, I don't know. Well, think about it for a minute. You paid to be here.
Yeah.
So we try to encourage a level of consciousness, and then now ask for what you want, right? And then allow the other person to say no if it's not in the code of conduct. But that's how and then honor that no. Thank them for taking care of themselves. So it's a shift in the way that we communicate, which I think is really deep, and I think that's why we've struck a nerve.
Absolutely. Like we tend to ignore this voice, this thing in our head that's asking for exactly what we want, and all we have to do is tap into it. And it's what you're describing is exactly like what the Mankind Project frames. They create a container in every single meeting that they have by doing exactly what you're saying, having a set of ground rules, and then saying, hey, ask for what you need, and you won't be judged. I think that's the biggest part, is like in today's society, if I walk up and ask somebody to cuddle them, I'm judged as a whole slurry of things. So,
right.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing here, is like you're able to build a sense of safety, which hasn't existed with any other group.
You're able to practice communication skills using touch as that vehicle. That's really what it is. Because if everyone learned the basic principles of consent, asking for what you want, knowing how to accept and honor a no, and still feel good about their ask, right?
And feel okay to say no too.
And feel okay to say no. So like when I run cuddle parties, and even so, basically the whole concept is if someone says no to you, it doesn't mean you're asking for something wrong. It just means they're honoring themselves for where they're at right now. So when someone says no, your job is to look them in the eye and say, thank you for taking care of yourself. Right? And so it's similar in Cuddlist, where it's like, first of all, try to discover what you want. And if you don't know what you want, ask for something and feel it out. And if it's not what that's not it, you can always ask for something else. But practice asking for what you want, and maybe you'll discover what you want. And the fact that there's, like you use the word container, a safe container where it's not going to go anywhere further, then there's freedom. There was a study done for kids in a playground, and there were walls, there was like a fence, and the kids when that fence was there would go to the fence and would explore and run around a lot. They took the fence down, right? And it turned out kids would stay closer and wouldn't go as far as where the fence is, because they were afraid, because there was no boundaries.
Right.
So if you put, especially in situations where you're learning something, or it's challenging notions of what you do and don't do, you need to have structure. Exactly. You need to have some structure so that comfort and safety can be there.
Yeah, and what I just said was stretching. So stretching toward a thing. If you want to reach really far and you don't think you can, it's good to have a definitive, here's where I either succeed or don't kind of thing.
Right.
And I love that you just went there, because it really is important. It's important to honor ourselves and to put things in a container. I've got this in Mindful Money. There's this I call it a mindfulness practice. So a lot of what you're saying is based around meditation too. Some of the best yogis build a container around their practice, and that's what they do. And it creates so much more inside of that, because you have that safety.
Right.
So what we do is we create a mindfulness practice, and in that practice, you're basically saying, what is it that you want for your life? What do you want? And I ask people that, and they can't answer me. It's
Right.
almost like those first few minutes that you were just talking about in the session. It's like really just sit with it and sit with that question, because you're going to discover what you need, right? What do you think people have found in your?
Oh, I mean, I think, well, I got to say, so my mission is to have people have an experience and have them feel something. So whether they feel happy or sad or broken down or whatever the feeling is after the session or even during the session, if they're having a different level of consciousness, then to have an awareness of that. And so let's say someone is, they haven't had any physical affection or attention in 20 years. So they have a session and they get really sad because they're like, holy shit, I've missed 20 years of my life, right? But at least they can remember, they have that memory of, okay, but I am capable of it. Because in their head, it was like, I'm not worthy of it. I'm not capable of it. I don't know how to do it anymore. And so maybe just having that experience of what it really feels like, maybe feeling sad that you haven't had it, but maybe it'll give you the impetus to try to figure out how to change that, right? What conditions can you put in your life? And so one of the things that Cuddlists do is they sort of help their clients sort of get in touch with sort of what some next steps could be, right? And help put them on, kind of like you have your program, put them on some kind of program. So like what can you do to get more of what you need? But I think for a lot of people, we become so numbed out, we don't know what we need. We're afraid to feel what we need,
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that a lot of the people that we talk to we at Mindful Money talk to have that same kind of thing. Like they just don't know. And it was funny. I was just about to ask you, what do you think would be 3 things or a couple more things that people could do to get in touch with this sense of what people, what they need, what they want? Like you have, the reason your platform is so awesome is because you have that safety created in each session. And I know you've personally experienced that. I mean, you had to draw from somewhere to create that. So what are some other things that people could do to get in touch with that sense of purpose?
So I think it's very loaded, and I think people need to take pressure off themselves if they don't know what their purpose is.
Nice.
And it doesn't mean they're broken or bad or wrong or a loser and everyone else knows what they want and they don't. It just means that they're not sure right now what their purpose is. So I think the first thing is to take the stigma and power away from it a little bit, to give people, because when you're in a stressed out place, you can't think. You're not flowing as well. So I think that's sort of, and again, that sort of speaks to a little bit of a change of consciousness. So you make it okay for someone to not know where they're at, right? And then
because it is okay. They've always been okay not knowing where they're at if they don't know.
Right, and it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to feel bad about yourself, but you don't need to make yourself feel worse by feeling, so if you feel bad about yourself, it's okay to say, I'm feeling bad about myself right now, but you don't need to make yourself worse.
By saying there's something wrong with you by feeling bad.
You don't need to beat yourself up by saying, God, I'm such an idiot because I feel bad about myself, as opposed to noticing I feel bad about myself. And I feel bad about myself right now because I don't have any money, I don't have any love in my life, or whatever it is. And so then you sort of realize what the problem is, or what sort of you want to shift. And then from that, it's okay, how do I get more love in my life? How do I get more money in my life? And then I guess for the money issue, people can go to, that's where you come in. So it's like, okay, here are some steps that you can do. Here's some, maybe, and you give them some practical tools, which puts the fence, the container around their experience with money, so they can start to make a little bit of progress and feel better about themselves. And then something can shift and they feel a sense of ownership because they do something that they're prideful. So like you said, if they have $5, and you can help them have, $2.90 at the end of the day after taking care of their needs, then that's a sense of accomplishment, right?
Yeah, and that's my biggest purpose, is to, similar to what Cuddlist does, help people find a deeper sense of purpose, because it's one of the first things I ask. And it's okay if you don't know, and I make that point, like, and I just use money as the vehicle, like you use cuddling as the vehicle, right? So I just say, hey, it's okay if you don't feel like you have enough right now, but you've always had enough. Just remember that. So it like starts with that same sense of safety. It starts with that same affirmation.
Right. Like I like using, where's your feet? Are they on the ground?
That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
Like literally with that, are you hungry right now? It's just the very basic grounding. Like, look at your feet. Where are they? Like that sort of stuff. Um, so yeah, I think to allow people to incorporate tools to make them feel differently and empower themselves, so that sort of negative sort of chatter that we have can start to dissipate a little bit, and then start to even shift into positive chatter, which then leads to a whole host of positive experiences.
Exactly. And one way to do that is to just get in the way of that negative chatter. Just like distance yourself from it a little bit. Recognize it, see it, and let it be.
Right. Say hello to it. It's sort of like the meditative concept of, watching clouds pass.
Exactly.
Hi, cloud. Hi, feeling. Hi, thought. How you doing?
Exactly.
I'll talk to you later. Instead of like, you're such a bad feeling. You just sort of let it go. And it's a practice. And I think money is so powerful. I think what you're doing is so wonderful because like touch, money is so loaded and there's such a cultural weight on it. And men are taught to like, you have to have money and you have to provide. And it's sort of like it's a measure of our worth in this Western world. And so that's really hard to unpack. By the time someone reaches your program, they've had 20, 30, however many years of this world, with the bombardment of messages from family, friends, media, etc., of what makes you a valuable person. And men in particular are valued by the amount of money that they have. And it's a hard thing. And similar with Cuddlist and Touch, the alpha people and the beautiful people that get all the touch in their life and that are, and sort of the winners, quote unquote, good for you. But there's a lot of people that just like don't have a lot of money or don't know how to hold money and handle money, don't know how to deal with touch. And maybe they have some intimacy issues or some body issues, images, or anxiety and depression or some PTSD or some trauma. And this is a way that they can start to get some healing from that by shifting it a little bit. So I think the work that we're doing, as different as it is really very similar.
It is, exactly. And I want to go back to your point about money as this weight. I don't think that's the word that you used, but you were painting this picture of money as a weight in today's society. And so that's a perfect segue into the final question, which is what kind of world would exist if money as we know it didn't?
Oh my God. Money's a tough one because, you need to be able to support yourself. There's Maslow's hierarchy of needs and, food, shelter, clothing, those basic needs, and those basic needs take money. And if you don't have those basic needs, it's very hard to get more into the higher part of the pyramid where you start to actualize yourself and really have an opportunity to give back to society. Now, that's obviously a very, everyone's different, and there are people that are able to do a tremendous amount of work without a tremendous amount of money. So I don't want to, I'm sort of overgeneralizing that, but I think it's, okay, what would the world be like if people didn't have to worry about money?
That's another way to put it. Yeah, the question was what kind of world would exist if money as we know it didn't? So there's a lot you can read into and play on there.
Yeah, money as we know it didn't exist.
I added the words "as we know it" after a couple.
Yeah. I'm a little bit stumped because it's such a big question and it's so tied into the political culture and every sort of culture that we live in, and also the thing about money. There is a motivational factor about earning money, and I think to live in a world where incentives are taken out is not necessarily a positive world, because when I work really hard and I accomplish something and money happens to be a byproduct of that, well, that's good. And and so I think you want to be money. It's okay to have money as a motivating factor in your life, because it does give you some comfort. And if you can hold it right, it can give you a lot of comfort. So, it's hard because I think, people need to be motivated to make themselves the best person that they can make themselves and to work hard, because I think people that don't work hard, it's really hard to stay happy if you're not doing anything, unless you're a certain type of person, so it's a long question. We could spend a year debating that one.
I'm glad that you saw the levels in that. And honestly, I really, really appreciate your answer, because that could go in so many different directions. And I don't think we've had somebody that thorough answer that question before.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, man. So if people want to experience a cuddle session or see more about Cuddlist, where can they go?
www.cuddlist.com. And if you forget that, if you Google professional cuddling, we're usually the second or third list. So it's cuddlist.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Adam, for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think we got a lot of great insight from you. And be sure to join us next week on the Mindful Money Podcast. You've been listening to the Mindful Money Podcast, a podcast for people who want to align their money with their values. Love this show? Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review. Want more incredible show content? Head over to mindfulmoneypodcast.com for show notes, past episodes, and a sneak peek at what's coming next. In next week's episode of the Mindful Money Podcast.
You can afford anything you want. What you're saying is, it is not worth me investing my time and effort to be able to obtain this thing. There is a huge difference in that language, and that lie is what perpetuates people to say, I can't afford it, when it's the thing that usually then they say that to that they can't afford not to do.